Steve Spagnuolo. Get inside the mind of a defensive coordinator. I gave you this homework assignment, and you came through.
You're surprised.
Said, find me a defensive coordinator.
You're surprised.
You didn't just find me one. You got me a great one.
Absolutely. Listen, you asked out loud yesterday, we should talk to the mind of somebody who's been in a situation like Jim Schwartz, who has won at the highest level, who's coached defense, who has a personality that's commanding in a room.
And then had a defense that gets ravaged by injuries.
It happens. So
but how does that change your mindset?
Spags is the first and only person. Now here's the thing. If Coach Spags could not do this, then we would have moved on. We wouldn't have done it. We wouldn't have brought on. We would have gone out and get Dean Pease or somebody like that. We go with Coach Spags. What's happening, brother?
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm great, guys. Kind of just went out on me a little bit there. Aton, Mike, but I got your back now, so I'm good. But before it went out on me, I sense a lot of energy over there today.
Every day, when we get the two of us together. Here's the thing,
like
we're trying to figure this out, and Mike mentioned as we just came back from the break how we were having this conversation yesterday about the public perception, and you get it in this city, you see it and hear it, the change from the fans of last year with Jim Schwartz to this year versus what Jim's going through, which is, hey, guys, we're not that far off from this defense doing a whole hell of a lot to get us there and securing a Super Bowl victory. You've been in that position where you've had the highest success, and you've also dealt with injuries before. How are you balancing this year if you're in a situation similar to Jim Schwartz?
Well, the first thing is, let's say Jim has not forgotten how to coach, man. I mean, they did a tremendous job last year. It's one of the main reasons why they were able to go on the run they did, even after losing their starting quarterback. Looking back at it, I think that's a huge reason. And my guess is, and I know a bunch of those defensive coaches over there and got a great deal of respect for all of them, is that they're going to stick to what they do and what they know. You don't panic or jump ship now on what you believe in. I know people might want guys to do that, but knowing Jim, what little I do, they'll get it fixed. I think the statement you made, Aton, about from this year to last year, it's a little thing here and that's what comes NFL football. That's what it comes down to. It's a fumble not recovered there, an inch there. They just make a first down. You just stop them on third down. And some of that hasn't gone all the Eagles' way, but I don't. Listen, they're still in the thick of it, and I don't think there's any reason to panic.
Really? Look at
the NFC East,
okay.
Right? I mean, the idea here, guys, right, is to get into the playoffs. I mean, that's the number one goal is that any staff is talking about, any teams are talking about, and I think it's right there in front of them. What do we have, 7 games left? I mean, the division, I know Washington's doing pretty well right now, but maybe that's a little bit of the confidence I have in the Eagles, but you can't panic. You can't afford to panic until somebody tells you that you're no longer eligible to get to the dance, and you just keep fighting to get there.
Coach, you mentioned about they're going to do what they do, and I guess that's one of the things that people, the fans sometimes, they come after us like, this guy's, how's he, when you're in the middle of the game. Now, I have kind of defended the defense. I think, look, and see what you think about it. Last year, they gave up 20 a game, or 18 a game. They're giving up 20 right now. They're playing about the same. The big difference is those turnovers. They're not getting the turnovers. But the other night, it's 13-13 after 3. The defense is playing pretty good. You give up 13 points through 3, I'm sure as a coordinator, you're probably pretty happy. Now the fourth quarter comes. He loses Darby. He's already without Mills. He's out with McLeod.
Yeah.
At that point, do you change or you just say, look, I got to roll and do what I do, even if my talent is not what I'm used to?
Yeah, I will tell you this, guys. One of the most difficult things to do is to change a game plan in the middle of a game due to injuries. Now, what I mean by that is there are some things you can stay away from. Sometimes when you look, I've been on this side with the injury thing, and the corner position is a tough one to recover from in the middle of the game. And because of where you think you might be weak, because there's a second or third guy in there, if you start, I've done this and made this mistake, start calling the game differently to protect certain players. And I think that can get you in trouble too. Now, look, there's a fine line, there's a balance. I'm sure they're over there on the sideline in the middle of the game trying to figure things out just like we all do. But one of the, let's go back to last year. Let's talk about injuries for a second, because it sounds like you guys have touched on that, and I think you're dead on. One of the hardest things to do in the NFL is overcome injuries that happen at the same position. Like last year, and you guys help me with this now, because I certainly was up in New York and wasn't enthralled in all the injuries that the Eagles had. But, I mean, you had Peters was hurt, was big, Hicks, Sproles, obviously the quarterback, right? But all one guy at a certain position. This year, and I've gone through this, when you start getting wiped out at one spot, and I think the secondary is where the Eagles are kind of having most of their injuries. Am I correct in saying that? I mean, you go McLeod, there's another safety I'm forgetting about.
McLeod, well, Graham went out, and then Sidney Jones has been out, and then Mills has gone out, and then Darby just went out.
Well, Darby, I mean, look, it's hard to recover from that. I remember one year in St. Louis, guys, we were game 7 or 8, and we did not have one corner on the roster that was in training camp.
My goodness.
And it's hard to overcome that. That's a key position. Corner on defense, certainly a quarterback or any of the old linemen on offense. But so that's what they're facing right now. And it's look, they'll try to find ways to figure it out. I know they got a tough game coming up Sunday. It's quite a challenge for the defense to go against Drew Brees. But some of those things you just can't control. You guys brought up a good point. You're dead on. As I was thinking about the talking today, Eitan, I just jotted down a couple of things, and you're hitting them. The injuries on defense and the lack of takeaways. But you guys have been in this town long enough to remember when Jim Johnson was here.
Sure.
We all have a great deal of respect for. There were a couple times when we went dry, turnover-wise, and I remember people were asking Jim why, and Jim, he was right on this. Something about takeaways. I mean, we all work on it in the NFL. Everybody works on it. Sometimes they just come in bunches, and when they come in bunches, we're all jumping up and down, and it makes a difference in winning football games. But sometimes they dry up a little bit too. I don't know what the reason. I don't think there's an explanation for that, but certainly when a team does have a bunch of turnovers come their way, it makes it easier to win a football game.
You open up so many things that we can take this conversation with. And let me go back to what you were saying about you yourself have made this mistake in the past about, okay, a new guy comes in due to injury, and you're not calling a game differently now because you've made this mistake to hide a weakness. What about something that hasn't been working for you consistently that conflicts with a defense you call? And I'll be specific, all right?
I know where you're going.
Okay, this Spags, this team is an abomination when it comes to tackling. They just cannot tackle. Yet Coach Schwartz insists on the sticks D, leaving 14 yards for a third and 15.
Can I add something to that, Coach? That Seth Joyner, I thought, brought up a great point the other night. It's one thing if you do it, but he's saying that offensive coordinators say on third down and long, the Eagles are giving us this play, so we're going to design – like, how many coaches have a play in their playbook for third and 15? That's not something that they're comfortable with. But if they know – the Eagles do this, we're going to design some plays when we play the Eagles for that third and 15 look.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know where you guys are going. It's hard for me to be critical, and the reason I say that is because, look, I'm just going to speak for myself, and I have that particular defense in the playbook. I think everybody has.
Right.
Some use it more than others. I'm a believer, and you got to mix it up. I mean, we didn't use it quite as much as the Eagles tend to do it, but that doesn't mean that it's good as bad. It's a good defense. It's good, sound football. You hit it, Eitan. One of the things you have to make sure of when you play that particular defense is because they are dumping the ball off. I mean, they're getting what they want. The next part of that is executing the tackle and getting off the field. So I'm with you guys on that. Sometimes you get it done, sometimes you don't.
And they were a great tackling team last year.
Yeah. Now look at I really haven't paid attention to that enough. I have not seen every game. I know you guys have seen every game and every play probably 4 or 5 times. So for me to speak on whether the tackling's been good or not, I can't speak to
you
that.
Can speak though, Coach, to how it's changed. I mean, you're not even a full year out of the league. So you can speak to, I think, overall, and I'm asking, have you sensed in the last 5-6 years in the NFL a general deterioration when it comes to overall tackling?
I would say yes, that's true. And Guys, I'll share this with you. So in 2011, we were going through the lockout. I was the head coach of the Rams. I was at the owners' meetings. And I remember we had heard through ownership and the negotiations that this whole cutting back on off-season, going from 14 weeks to 9 or whatever it is, and the training camp rules that were coming in. I remember Bill Belichick standing up. You have microphones there in the big room, and there's owners, there's coaches, there's GMs. I remember him specifically saying, I hope we all realize that when we cut back all this time that we're going to have with our players, that the fundamentals are going to suffer first. And he specifically talked about tackling. I mean, look, Bill's a defensive guy, but Bill was right. However many years ago that was, and it does hurt the game of football a little bit from a defensive standpoint. Now, look, everybody out there watching the game of football enjoys that. They like the fact that there's more scoring. I mean, it's legendary, right, guys? The offensive points that people are putting up.
Yeah.
And I tell you, somebody brought this up. I don't know if I read it or was flipping through something, but how'd you like to be Tennessee, Baltimore, and really go to Dallas? Those are the three top points allowed defenses in the league right now. I mean, Tennessee at 16.8, Baltimore 17, Dallas 19. That's really good defense, man. Yeah. You're only giving up 17, 18 points a game, and yet all three of those teams, Tennessee's 5-4, but Baltimore and Dallas are 4-5. So there's a lot more to this game. It's a team game.
Well, and Coach, if I was to tell you Philly is 6th in the league in points against, am I supposed to surmise that their defense is, in fact, the issue? Like, if you're the defensive coordinator and you're giving up 20 points a game in today's NFL where nobody can tackle, and if I say you're 6th best in the league, aren't you sticking your chest out? Instead, people want this guy out of here.
Doesn't make sense.
Look, you all you can do. Look, I'm not a big stat guy, but they are what they are, and the number one goal of all defensive players and coaches is to keep points off the scoreboard. So when you're doing that, in some ways you're doing your job. Now, the prideful coaches, like we all are, and I've said this in front of a defense before, hey guys, I don't care how many points the offense scores or doesn't score, we need to make sure that we don't allow, we prevent or allow one less than what our team gets. Now that's prideful part, but it's a team game. I mean, I'll give you another interesting. So to me, it's more importantly team-wise, it's the point differential. And so here are the teams that lead the league, with 11-point differential, offense and defense. Saints, Kansas City at 11, the Rams at 10, Pittsburgh at 8, Chicago at 10. So it's a team game.
Yeah.
You not only got to score a lot of points to help your defense, you got to play good defense to help your offense. So I have a hard time, look, this is all new to me this year, Eitan and Mike, as you know, to be sitting back and to be hearing things about teams, because normally we get in those, buildings, get in those four walls. We just got the blinders on. We're worried about the next game. But I'm looking at it and seeing it, and the game's changed. It's this offensive splurge is amazing to me, and part of it, but there's some really good offensive talent in this league right now.
Former Eagles and Giants defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo, former Rams head coach, finished last season as the interim head coach with the Giants. If you're watching the Eagles right now and you need to put up a game plan because you've put up a bunch of them against this team, do you look at this team and say, team is pretty one-dimensional? That's an easy team to. Are you excited about putting a defensive game plan together with what you're watching with this team?
I'm thinking, as you say that, Mike, I'm thinking about the Saints and the challenge that they have right now, and I can just share that I'm glad I'm sitting in the seat I am right now, which is at home with my wife, waiting to have dinner later on tonight. Look, the Saints are scary. You got the injury thing. They got to get healthy. Talking about the Eagles, and look, don't be surprised if all of a sudden they rise up, man, and win this football game. It is tough to do that down in New Orleans, but you got to go out. When Wednesday rolls around in the NFL, you forget about everything that's happened prior to this point, win or lose, and you just focus on the next challenge, and that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I wonder right now. It looks like Jim Schwartz, and I think it's just his personality, is not rattled, and you just saw that yesterday. Body language looks the same. He comes out, and that's just Jim Schwartz. I covered him in Nashville. I didn't expect him to make any drastic changes week to week. That's just who he is. And I don't expect Doug Peterson either, Coach, to kind of change who he is, but it seems as if he is, and I don't know this is a bad thing. I think that this can be interpreted, and that's why I defer to you, as maybe a good thing, which is on the surface, oh, Doug Peterson's rattled. Oh, Doug Peterson looks nervous. Oh, but maybe a little deeper, it's Doug Peterson cares a lot about what's happening right now and is reacting accordingly, as opposed to just riding that high wave of winning the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, guys, I talked to a reporter last night, called me an article he was doing on Andy Reid. Now, you guys know, Eitan, you do know the respect I have for Andy.
Sure.
The guy's been winning a lot of football games in this league for a long time. One of the greatest attributes of Andy Reid and any good football coach at any level, especially in the NFL, is to stay balanced, not to get rattled, not high highs and low lows. That's important for your football team to function that way, because once you start going off track one way or the other, then what happens next? Your staff does, your team, your players do, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a good quality. Look, I've never worked with Jim. I know Doug a little bit. That's what those guys should do. That's what makes it. Hey, look, they rode that same approach last year and won a Super Bowl. So let's put a little bit of trust in them right now and see what happens.
How difficult is that, Coach, when the head coach or coordinator starts to lose some of his guys? Frank's gone, DeFilippo's gone, Jim Johnson goes, McDermott goes. I mean, when that starts to happen, how do you rebound as a coach and move on from that?
Well, you hope you replace them with good people, right? I mean,
But sometimes it's more than just good people. It's like you might have this relationship and trust.
Doug looks totally different without Steve Filippo and Frank.
Sometimes that's overlooked. Like you get three guys in a room and they just love the conversation they have. And then you bring a fourth guy in that room and sometimes he's just out of place. He might be a bright man, but he just doesn't fit in.
Yeah, as you're saying that, Mike, look, I'm sure that's very, very typical of every business. I mean, you're talking about relationships, right? You're talking about working environment, working together, respecting each other's ability to do the job that they're supposed to do. I think it's an interesting dynamic. And, and to your point of your original question about tough to lose people, et cetera, I found one of the hardest things to do as a head football coach was to keep replacing coaches as you lost them. That's tough to do. Go out and find good people. And when you do find good ones and you have them, you don't want to get rid of them. That's why you see some people get kept back from jobs, because it's hard to find really good quality coaches, any kind of employee. It doesn't matter what business you're in. But I don't know the inner dynamics of everything with the Eagles. I know people talk a lot about last year and this year.
Right.
I'm not familiar enough to know, but I'm sure everybody – look, I respect coaches because I know how hard that job is.
Yeah.
I did it for a long time, hope to be doing it again. And so I tend not to pass judgment on something that I don't know, that I'm not in the middle of.
Well, one thing that people liked about you when you were here, now you learned under Jim, you like the blitz. You like you like to send guys, and you would think defensive guys are aggressive and they like that. Sometimes I wonder, how does Schwartz sit there all game long and never get the itch to say,
send
everybody after this guy? Like, that is just a weird – I mean, I'm saying it's wrong or right. I just find it to be interesting that a defensive-minded guy, and he's got guys just hanging out and sending four. Like, if you knew you had a great four, would you still want to be blitz heavy, or would you say – I mean, like, is the philosophy we want to get there with four and we don't have to send guys? Or are you still, I got four good ones and I'm coming at you with six?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I'd probably tend to lean that way, Mike, but there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with the other way. I once did a study a couple, 3 years ago on I'm not getting off track, but I'm going a little bit further on how many sacks, how many quarterback pressures come up in a three-man rush. And you'd be surprised at the number of times that people will get to a quarterback or affect the quarterback with three-man rush. Now, what does that mean? It probably just means that what it means to me is you can do a lot more coverage-wise, different types of coverages with 8 guys than you can with 7. And sometimes quarterbacks don't like that. So that's, if you had 3 really good – look, if you have four real good pass rushers that you think can get the quarterback to get rid of it, make the quarterback get rid of it in under 2 seconds every down, you probably don't need to bring anybody else. But it's philosophical. We all have our ways that we want to do things. I can tell you guys this. You can win with the blitz, and you can get burnt by it too.
Especially as
I remember
things have changed, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it still comes back to having good players and guys functioning together. But I remember that I'm going back, I think it was 2015 with the Giants. And I want to say, I believe this is when it was. First game we opened up Dallas. We were ahead. They went on a 2-minute drive at the end. Romo was still the quarterback. And because of the personnel we had, I did not pressure. They ended up scoring on the last play. Romo hit Witten right in the middle of the field. I think it was actually a 3-man rush. We dropped the eighth guy, and the eighth guy that was supposed to double, Witten didn't. Okay, so
who was that eighth guy? No, I'm just joking.
I wouldn't. Give
of
him
course,
anyway.
No. Of all people, Spags, you would not dime anybody out. I know that to be true.
We would fast forward 7 days later. We played Atlanta at home. We're ahead again. It's in a similar situation. So what did I say? I swore to myself, I'm not going to let that happen again. We're not going to sit pat. We pressured. Ryan throws one over the top to Julio Jones, and they score. So, look, it still comes back to executing whatever you call. My point is blitzing doesn't always solve everything. It really doesn't. I mean, you got to be really good at it. It's got to be something you do all the time. It's got to be something your players are comfortable with. And philosophically, sometimes everybody loves it when you bring people and it works out.
Right.
It puts a lot of pressure on the guys behind them. So you got to pick your spots.
All right, let me ask you this, because I wonder, in your time coaching, coordinating, running a team, running a defense, both, if you've dealt with a player personality type like Jimmy Butler, who is and listen, nobody knows who this guy is. We just know the story, what he came through, and the positives and negatives that are associated with him. And you know from being on the other side of it that a lot of times media and fans, we get it wrong about who somebody is. But with that said, the positive of Jimmy is he cares so much, he grinds so hard that it might turn some people off who are not on that same level. So I'm not talking about specifically with the Sixers. I'm just saying, in your time, that type of personality in a player, especially in an alpha sport like the NFL, if you've dealt with somebody like that, how do you balance it where it's like you need to let that person breathe and be able to practice and play as hard as they can because that's who they are, but you also know that there might be, in your case, like 50 other guys that are looking at this like, whoa, dude, that's
Well, he was here for T.O., right?
Well, yeah, but maybe that's the best example, but I also feel like so many people warmed up to T.O. I mean, B. West tells all the time about how in practice they thought they knew what they were doing until T.O. comes on and takes it to another level.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've dealt with something like that. Maybe it is T.O., maybe it's somebody else, and then how you manage that.
Yeah, I got a couple examples of that. I didn't have to manage it specifically, but first of all, I would invite always those types on my team. I just like those ultra competitive guys. And then sometimes it takes a little bit of educating because when they take it a little bit too far, and you ruffle some feathers with your teammates, then it becomes a little bit of a problem. But I'll give you two examples. So when I was in Baltimore in 2014 or 2013, they brought Steve Smith.
Yes.
From Carolina to Baltimore. Steve Smith is an ultra competitor. In Baltimore, we had a bunch of alpha dog ultra competitors as well. So when Steve Smith joined that, he loved it because that's exactly what he wanted. To kind of hear you talk when you're talking about Jimmy Butler, and I just listened to the things just like you guys have. The other guy I'll give you is Brandon Marshall, who's a wide receiver. I think
he's playing with the Saints now.
I think the Saints, yeah. They just took. I really like Brandon Marshall. He was in New York last year. We got him in the off season. Now we had heard all the stories, or you heard all the rumors about him with the Jets, that he didn't get along with his teammates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As I got to know Brandon Marshall, what I picked out was what you guys are talking about. I picked out that he was an ultra competitive guy that worked his butt off, that wanted to win so bad. And I think in some of the conversations with him, he just didn't feel like his other teammates felt the same way. And what we conveyed as maybe somebody being disruptive in a locker room was just a competitive guy wanting to win. Why would you not want guys like that?
Yeah.
And there's a fine line. There's a fine line. That's what coaches sometimes have to do to make sure that they, first of all, you got to get to know that person, gain his trust, and then you work your way through it. But everything I know about Jimmy Butler as a player is a great one. And I've enjoyed listening to the things that he said. I listened a little bit of his press conference yesterday. So
Great, isn't it?
I'm excited to watch him play, too. It's a great thing. I've become a Sixers fan. I grew up a Celtics fan.
I know. I didn't mention Boston.
How about that? What are you going to do, right? Never lose the accent.
I was going to say, I would like to hear a conversation between you and Brett Brown. That would be great.
We'd at least understand each other. Nobody else would. We would.
Well, Coach, it was a pleasure catching up to you. Hopefully we could do it again. By the way, when you were in St. Louis, was that my guy Mark Bulger?
Yes. I love Mark was a good man. We just had him the 1 year.
Yeah.
And then it was evident that Mark and I had great conversations. I got a great deal of respect for him. Do you know what he's doing now or where he is?
You know what? He's doing some radio stuff. I thought he was doing a little bit of radio, and I know he was down in St. I went to school with him. We hung out a lot. I mean, him, Anthony Becht. I don't know if he was in St. Louis when you were there at all.
He was gone. Yeah. Man. Mark Bulger was one of the most accurate quarterbacks that I was ever around and had to play against. I mean, he could chuck it down. He'd be in practice. I don't know. In 7-on-7, we ever got him to get an incomplete pass. He was a quality player. He had some really good years there.
He was a quiet man.
And look at he obviously did something right because Kurt Warner was pretty good, and they. He was out the door and Mark was in, so that's what this league is.
I say there's a man that I used to have a couple of pops with in college. He's making millions, and here I am. All right, Steve Spagnuolo, we appreciate
you're doing okay.
We appreciate the conversation. Really good insight. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate you, brother.
Enjoyed it, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, he appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.